Indians. So if you look at the Indian parameters of Indian history, we are still struggling to get the unfathomable depth of the Indian variety of Indian history. Because if I leave the question open, how many of us are aware of the history of the Northeast? How many of us are aware of the history of the Northeast? So when the Northeast people write there like Mamangdai or Temsulao or Robinus Angam, will they be considered as marginal writings? 4 years back, we came out with a book of marginal writings in English with a special chapter on the Northeast. Who are on the margins? Gender-wise, caste-wise, geographical location-wise, politics-wise? And if a student writes the autobiography of his own, will it be considered as a marginal writing? Because teachers are on this side and students are on that side. In this conference, I am privileged to see the overwhelming variety which will add dimensions, which will show directions of Dalit studies in India. I am really proud that one state at least has made provision from the state government for academic deliberations, social deliberations, not only in the cities like Ahmedabad, but also in the cities like here. If we are to promote Dalit writings, we have to promote marginal writings, we will have to be decentralized. Only Calcuttans or Delhiites or center locations in Hyderabad is not India. If we are to really address the issue critically, aesthetically, politically, sociologically, we have dimensions and we will have to embrace the changing global code that is English, Mandarin and some European languages. I will be also looking forward when Dalit text will be translated into the other Indian languages. Suppose Harish Mangalamji's texts which are in Gujarati, if it's been translated into Bangla, it has also an implication of its own. So I really look into the positive trajectory of this particular seminar, deliberations, and all who have come from different shores will contribute their valuable thoughts, discussions, questions will be raised, and we will go back to our institutions with parameters and eyes to read society properly, appropriately, and fix it up, the timing, changing demands of the time with parameters, political dimensions, sociological connotations available in front of me. I expect the seminar will be a grand success. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Sarangi. Now, it is also a matter of great pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Rajesh Karankar. Teaching experience. He is very inspiring, innovating, committed and compassionate teacher and research guide. He is keenly interested in Indian literature, Dalit literature, literature in translation, English and American literature, communication skill and mass communication also. His many scholarly articles, particularly based on Dalit literature and Ambedkarite movement, have been published in reputed international and national journals and magazines. He also actively works as a social activist. At last, I would like to take little liberty to say that As a research student of Dr. Rajesh Karankar, I have always found him a very nice, cooperative and a gentle person. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Rajesh Karankar to deliver his speech. Dr. Karankar is going to talk on constructing identity of the oppressed.
Thank you, Gilbert. Dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. Let me tell you, introductions are sometimes a bit exaggerations, but it is the warmth and the respect which matters. I'm aware that the time we are running late for schedule and the time given is limited. And believe me, I won't be able to read my paper, and I don't want to read now, but I'll summarize it and present before you the main arguments of my paper to the best of my ability, because it is a difficult task. Therefore, I will not be quoting scholars, I will not be going to theoretical perspective, I will only give you the main thesis of my paper and the main arguments, and try and finish it before the president of the session rings his bell. Friends, let me tell you that the identity construction, especially in India, has always been a politically, socio-politically motivated fact. And this is the main thesis of my paper, that the construction of identities of the oppressed in this country has always been a part of the identity politics to gain supremacy over certain people and keep them there as long as they can until it suits their motive. And therefore, a lot of justification is being given for those stigmatized identities with which the oppressed suffer. Now here, I'm deliberately using this term oppressed because a lot of people misunderstand the word Dalits and confine the meaning of Dalit only to the untouchables and SCs and the STs. But if you look at the manifesto of Dalit Panthers, you will realize what does actually Dalits mean. It includes everybody who is oppressed, suppressed, exploited at the hands of the dominant few, justified by the religious sanctions. That includes not only SC, ST, OBC, Shudras and women, but also people with gendered orientations, and which have been referred to by a lot of scholars as LGBT. Therefore, whenever I use this term oppressed, I am using this term with this connotation. That may please be noted. Now the politics of identity formation or construction of identity, I have taken the three levels at which it is formed. One at a literary level, that is in the literature. Second at a social level, during the struggle of social movement, and through the political structure. Because these are the three levels at which it is being challenged and decentralized. There are identity of an individual often comes with a process of cultural socialization, which is influenced by his or her belonging to a group or up to a particular culture. In recent years, the question of identity in India has been on the top of the agenda at debates on culture, politics and Indian nationalism. On the one hand, we are confronted with the militant Hindu revivalism, trying to define India in terms of an upper caste Sanskritic Hindu identity, and on the other hand, with voices from below, from tribals, Dalits, religious and linguistic and ethnic groups, which are demanding elbow room and acceptance of their specific cultural identity in the Indian national commonwealth. There are, in fact, various types of identities that we come across so far. The oppressed groups are concerned because the dominant sections or the power centers in the present sociology structures in this country have given these identities to them, and therefore it is what they call them and what they feel about them. There are various types of identities: imposed identities, self-identities or self-felt identities, acquired identities, and so on. Most of such identities are the result of socio-cultural and political constructs. Ultimately, these identities are decided by the dominant sections of society in India. The notion of a high and low, purity and pollution will ultimately decide the location and normality. Mai bangi hu, untouchable. All right. So these are from the entities that they write about. But when they write about these identities, they just don't want to accept them. They write to reject. They write to assert. They write to displace. But that does not mean, because many people they try to dismiss the literature saying that, oh, it is literature of protest, it is literature of anger. Doesn't it beyond that? It is beyond that, and therefore let me tell you what a very, very famous Dalit literary personality and activist talks about Dalit. Baburao Bagul has rightly defined Dalit, and he says Dalit literature is not the literature of simply protest, but it's literature which demands justice. The literature which demands human dignity. The literature which is there for the establishment of dignity of human being with respect in society. And therefore, the writers, when they write, they want to displace, assert, condemn, and they are in the process of establishing their identities as not simply into negative and stigmatized way, but in a more positive way. And when you read these alternatives, we realize that the hero or the protagonist is not what he is called, but he is much more, much better, much civilized. Though those subjectivities have been kept out of schools and colleges, they had no right to take education. They had no right to change their profession. They were called, even today some speakers mention the tribals as Vanvasis because of their own orientation, but they did not remain savages. They have maintained their cultures, and when you read them, you realize they are justified and they are demanding their due from society and the due recognition in the form of new identities. And it is therefore, in the social field, there are various socio-cultural movements, and Professor Mane sir is here, and his very, very important books talks about those social cultural revolts in India. All these revolts were also for the establishment of the real, true identity of these people who were neglected for centuries of their identities which were real. And therefore, when we talk about Dr. Ambedkar and his struggle to the establishment of human dignity in society and to the reconstruction of this nation, we have to also keep in mind that Dr. Ambedkar did not invent a new struggle. It is his struggle is a part of, his movement is a part of. The movement for centuries, which has been going on, he has taken it forward. The only difference is, the earlier movements were regional movements in different parts of the country. Dr. Ambedkar connected all these movements and created a national level movement to create a national identity for his people and all those marginalized sections of society. But while this is happening, what happens is, the main impediments in this, the main hurdle in creation of these national identities and real identities of these people is those smaller people who are those people from the oppressed sections, when they have their hand in glove with the oppressed classes. When the oppressed becomes the instrument of the oppressor, then there is a problem. And therefore, I'd like to give a very, very small anecdote, an example of a caged bird, which very often I give to my friends too. And that caged bird is a popular bird that people keep in a cage called parrot. When people bring parrot and keep it in a cage, in the beginning the parrot tries to liberate, because that is not the place and that is not the instinct of that particular bird to remain that way caged and imprisoned in a small cage. So it puts its wings, beats its wings, and slowly realizes that beating wings is of no use. Now, when the master gives the bird, sometimes dove, atta deta hai, guna hua atta, dove, even red chilies, the bird becomes helpless and starts eating it. Though the instinct of the bird is the fruit is not sweet enough, the bird leaves the sweet fruit there and goes in search of a better fruit. It takes flight in the open sky, fully liberated. But the bird gives in. And slowly the master teaches his language to the bird, and bird imitates the master's language. It is the problem here. When the bird starts speaking the master's language, that is one of the major hurdles in the freedom struggle of these oppressed classes and acquiring new identities, the new identities that they really deserve. Now the bird initially tries to break off and break free from that cage, but when the bird loses all its abilities to fly and to live independently, later on after some period, even if the master, the oppressor opens the door of the cage and the bird doesn't want to come out, the master puts its hand in the cage and pulls the bird out and keeps the bird outside. The bird doesn't know how to fly, the bird cannot dare to fly, and the bird once again goes back in the cage. Now, this is one model of enslaving the oppressed in the system and making them obey the master's order. Let me give you another example. Whether this is right for a bird to keep quiet and accept, or there is another bird which is also like other birds, which is kept inside. The moment it is brought and put in the cage, the bird will again beat its wings so vehemently that its wings will be injured, and the blood which is oozing from its wings is smearing the bars of the cage. The bird refuses to accept slavery and hegemony and power. If the master gives anything to eat to the bird doesn't eat it and one day dies in the cage. Now there are two models. Which one is better? You'll ask me, the first one is better. At least he is able to live. The second gives in and dies. What's the use of dying? But a lot of scholars say it is not the death which matters. The bird has left blood stains on the bars of the cage, which are inspirations for the new birds will be brought in. Inspiration to struggle and inspiration to get free. That is very, very important. And therefore, the spirit of struggle, no matter what happens, the spirit of struggle to liberation of the people and acquiring new human dignity, that goes in a long way to mention that. Similarly, the stigmatized identities, there is also, and therefore, Dr. P.D. Waghela also mentioned that this cultural nationalism and the cultural politics of certain groups to keep these people where they are, and this culture as the instrument of dominance, which also plays a very important role in the identity formations of the marginalized and the oppressed subjectivities. Now, thus the oppressed, therefore, the oppressed, after Dr. Ambedkar has taken cudgel for them, and when they start to follow Dr. Ambedkar in toto, they started kicking away the negative identities and they take a new path, sometimes by education, by job, by position and political position, and even by conversion to other religions like Buddhism and Christianity. When the oppressed asserts their new identity, their previous identity follows them. But in this country, what has happened is the enemy makes it difficult. The dominant sections make it difficult for them to change their identity, and therefore, even after the political struggle, if some Dalit or some oppressed person becomes the chief minister of the state, what happens is he still is identified as either Dalit chief minister or a Dalit prime minister or a Dalit chief justice of India. It is not very easy, but Dr. Ambedkar did not give in, and one day he started arguing and articulating for the sake of them, and therefore Dr. Identity wanted to put them together. So Dr. Ambedkar gave them common identities. The next section of my paper deals with this, that Dr. Ambedkar gives them common identities and positive identities. He also gave them ironical identities, and therefore Dr. Ambedkar never called them Dalits, but he did call them as non-caste people, Bahishkrit people, broken people. It doesn't deal with one caste, it deals with certain groups of castes. And after the Second Indian Act of 1935, a new administrative nomenclature came into place, and the new entities were created. Hundreds of castes were put into one list, and they were called scheduled castes. to 1935 Act and